will be for somebody's manuscript. And Maria and others on the board. I should mention that Jim Haba, who I see on the Zoom, is on the board. Michelle Lerner is on the board, and Jim Gwynn also on the board. And we, in addition to having this contest, we are also going to continue to publish Lips Magazine, which Jim is going to manage, and the foundation will support that. So people have been very generous so far in contributing to the foundation, but we're not yet 501c3 eligible. So I haven't actually been promoting that. But thanks to everybody who has contributed, who considers contributing, or if you can't, we totally understand that as well. But I know that was, my mother was really happy before she passed away that her memory would live on in the form of the foundation and with all of her friends in the poetry world. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry. I'm sorry I sprung that on you without telling you.
That's okay.
Okay, so could we start?
Maria, we've already started the live stream.
Oh,
so
excellent.
You can jump right in now.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see you all here today. And we're going to do a reading from Laura Boss's book, Family Promises. And you can see it has Linda Hillinghouse's painting on the front. And it was published by New York Quarterly Brooks, and who also published several other books by Laura. And I think that she'd be very happy that we're reading from her book and that we're trying to call attention to the book. Obviously, Laura passed away in April, and she's not able to do what she normally would have done, what I normally would have done, which is run all over the place and giving readings. So we're trying to give the book a little boost by reading some of the poems from this book. And I'm just going to call the names of people who are going to be reading, and then you read, don't talk before, just read the poem. And the first person is Francesca Maxime, and a Gucci suitcase filled with heroin.
A Gucci suitcase filled with heroin for GC. Years ago, in the lobby of an Atlantic City hotel, I clutched a Gucci suitcase filled with enough heroin to wean Gregory slowly off it. The idea for him to get off it was mine. The idea for it to happen in Atlantic City was his. And he told me it was too dangerous for him, with his beatnik look, to carry the suitcase. And according to him, I looked so innocent and proper, no one would question me. I worried about being arrested. But I was obsessed with him and getting him off drugs, more than I worried about what trouble I could be in. His love of gambling was almost as strong as his love of drugs. And I was beginning to finally realize much more than his love of me. I thought each day I would give him fewer of the glassine envelopes labeled poison until he was finally free of his decades-long habit. But of course, I was wrong. Wrong to trust him not to sneak more, wrong to trust him not to go through all the gambling money, wrong to trust myself and my belief that my love would be strong enough to change what no other woman before me had been able to change. Later that night, after he had pawned the watch I had given him, we headed back to my apartment above the Hudson River with its spectacular view of the New York skyline, where we had been living with his unfinished paintings on the walls. We fought. I raged about his breaking his promise. He raged about my rage. He threw some of his poems down my incinerator, probably knowing how that would also shock me, after I thought nothing else he could do would. He called his old girlfriend, who unlike me, didn't mind his drugging as much as she did his drinking, as she had once told me. He called a taxi and left for her place. He was often called l'enfant terrible of poetry and literary essays, but I thought of myself that night as a woman wild enough, or more accurately, stupid enough to do anything for a man she loved, even if it meant her own possible destruction.
Thank you, Princess. Okay, as Susan Balick is going to read Found Cat. Wait, you're muted.
The coldest day in February, I hear a mewing on our shared walkway. A cat leaps up the steps, still mewing, and rubs its body against my legs. Blackest, with startling green eyes and bones sticking out of its famished body. I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person. I'm allergic to cats, which may be why I'm a dog person. Still, I give the cat some of my dog's food outside. My husband tells me this is a mistake, that I'll never get rid of the cat. The cat sleeps on our doormat. Again, I feed it outside. The next day, I bring it inside, worried about ringworm it might have because of a bare circle around its tail. But I'm more worried the cat will freeze or starve to death. I call the police in 3 neighboring towns, but no one has reported a lost pet. I put up signs, found cat, and my phone number. No one calls. This affectionate cat is obviously an abandoned cat. I buy a litter box it immediately uses. I get advice from a friend who used to rescue cats before she got sick. I take the cat to our dog's vet. She does not have ringworm but gets tested for other diseases. I get her rabies shots and all the other necessary shots and vaccines. I find out she is a he, and a 1.5 years old, with no identity chip. The vet says he's very friendly and sweet, which I know. The vet tells me the cat is extremely underweight. He does not have ringworm. He is not cat HIV positive. After the test results, they phone and tell me he has an infectious disease and needs medication for 3 weeks to clear it up. And I need to give that medicine to my 14-year-old Bijan as well. I worry the cat will scratch our dog's spindle tumor and have covers put on the cat's claws. I've called St. Hubert's, but they say they're full and aren't taking cats now. I called 2 animal control places, but they can't promise me the cat won't be euthanized. I feed the cat baby food chicken and baby rice cereal for his diarrhea. The cat sleeps on my placemat on the dining room table. He loves me to pet him, under his chin and behind his ears. He is ravenous and constantly mews for food and jumps on the kitchen counter. If I go into the kitchen to try to prepare even breakfast, my husband, Bishan, Nellie, and I lock ourselves in the bedroom at night because of my cat allergies. The cat roams the rest of the apartment. I feed Nellie on the bed so the cat won't eat her food. At night, the cat sometimes runs down to the basement where I keep his food and litter box. He runs up and sleeps on my placemat or outside on our closed bedroom door, or just roams the tiny apartment while we stay locked in our bedroom. In the middle of the night, the cat starts viewing and doesn't stop until I come out. Take him on my lap and pet him. He mews and I give him more food. The cortisone shot on my knee is wearing off and I'm having trouble bringing his food to the basement, as well as cleaning his litter box 3 times a day. The cat is now on cat food and I take him back to the vet once he's off the medicine for 3 weeks. The cat in 4 weeks has gone from 5 pounds, 1 ounce to 9 pounds, 6 ounces. He is no longer underweight. The cat is ready to be neutered. I've spent my monthly freelance earnings on this cat. No one seems to want him at this moment, though I notice my husband seems fonder of him each day, as do I, through my sneezes and itchy face.
Thank you, Susan. Stanley, you're next. And the poem is, "This is a year of medical appointments."
This is the year of medical appointments. When I asked my cousin, who has retired to Florida, how she and her husband, my blood cousin, spend their time, she answers, "We spend our time going to medical appointments." And so it seems for my husband and me, and most of our friends our age. My husband's EKGs and hopeful tests to see if he is really ready for the heart valve, since the orthopedist won't do surgery for the knee replacement my husband needs, and after he has the valve done. Meanwhile, the gastroenterologist at his office recommends a colonoscopy, though he has also warns of its risks at my husband's age. And the podiatrist wants to see me every 2 weeks, and my food problem improves. I am sick of his golf and sports and people outdated magazines, and wish he'd subscribe to Vanity Fair. The ophthalmologist tells me I will need cataract surgery in the near future, as my husband recently had. The orthopedist gives me a shot of cortisone for my knee and asks if I have time to go to rehab 3 times a week to strengthen my leg muscles. She tells me after she looks at the x-rays last month that I have torn rotator cuffs in both shoulders, and to stop carrying a heavy shoulder bag, and to stop carting my book bag filled with books I need for workshops. I tell her I enjoy the magazines in her waiting room where my husband and I spend so many hours. My primary physician at my physical tells me I need to schedule appointments for a bone scan, for a mammogram, for the dermatologist, for the hematologist. And my husband reminds me to have an appointment tomorrow at the vet's to see if the abandoned cat we recently brought inside is free of his infection. Maybe I'll just forget my appointments and take care of the cat.
Thank you, Stanley.
Sorry.
Kevin Carey, and he's going to read On Hearing of John Ashbery's Death.
On hearing of John Ashbery's death. Years ago, when I was just starting my magazine, John Ashbery was teaching at Brooklyn College. I was just an adjunct at FDU in New Jersey. And one of my colleagues was taking a poetry workshop with Ashbery and suggested I go with her to class. In those early years of my magazine, I'd try to get work from established poets by driving to their readings and asking them for a poem from my poetry journal, possibly a new piece they'd just read. And though Brooklyn College was an even longer trip than usual, I thought sitting in an Ashbery's workshop and the possibility of publishing one of his poems worth the long trip. I remember how odd the group seemed. I felt awed by his presence, though rather baffled by some of his poems, despite their luminous language. When the workshop was over, I offered to give him and some of his students a ride back to the city. He accepted. I gave him a copy of my magazine and said I'd be honored if he would consider sending a poem to it. We piled into my car, Ashbery in the passenger seat, a couple of his favorite students in the back. It was raining hard. I could barely see, and have several good friends who refuse to drive with me because of my style of driving. Everyone in the car seemed to be clutching the seat in front of them, except John Ashbury, who had his hand braced on the glove compartment. "Brake, brake," he yelled, as I barely missed a turn onto 8th Avenue. When he finally got out at his white brick Chelsea apartment house along with his students, he barely mumbled a goodbye. I never did get a poem from him.
Thank you, Kevin. Bob Evans, The Last Time is the name of the poem. Bob Evans.
The last time. The last time I saw my younger son was after I rented a Hertz car for him near Paramus, filled the gas tank, went to an ATM to give him some extra money he needed, and watched him zoom down the road. I drove to a nearby 7-Eleven to get a cup of coffee, since I hadn't had time for breakfast because of my early school workshop in Patterson. My son was in the 7-Eleven, holding a large cup of Pepsi and an Entenmann's peanut butter tandy cake. He beamed when he saw me and tried to hug me as he put down his cup of Pepsi on the counter, where it immediately spilled, covering candy, paper items, little flashlights, and some other things. He gets that clumsiness from me, who is always dropping things. The clerk, probably the owner, scowled at my son. "Oh, I'm sorry, my son said, and there was no doubt he meant it. That was the last time 4 months ago that I saw my son, though I have reported him as a missing person, though he didn't call me on Mother's Day, first time ever, didn't call me on my birthday, first time ever, didn't call his ex-wife on her birthday, first time ever, didn't call his daughter on her birthday, first time ever. The Hertz car has disappeared, though reported missing to the police. The police detective has not been able to find him. The missing report is in. The morgues have been checked. Where do you think he is? I asked my husband, his stepfather. Dead and in the trunk of the rental car, he replies.
Very good, Bob. Thank you. Jean Fleming, and she's reading So Much Time Has Gone By Since I've Heard from Him. Jean Fleming. Where'd she go? She should be there. Jean, you're muted, honey. Unmute. Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this iPad. So much time has gone by since I've heard from him. I got an email from him today. So much time has gone by since I've heard from him. I dated him almost 40 years ago. I met him at a poetry reading at St. Clement's in Manhattan. I had just broken up with the worst guy I had ever lived with, a guy I had met when I was having a walking nervous breakdown after leaving my husband, a guy who played in a rock band, though they hardly had any gigs, a guy who smoked 18 joints at night, a guy with no job and didn't seem anxious to get one, but content to live off me for now. The poet that night asked me if I'd like to go out for coffee and something to eat. I said yes. Still smarting from feeling used by my recent ex-boyfriend, I uncharacteristically said to this poet as we were ordering, if you want to be platonic friends, let's split the bill. But if you want us to be romantic, you pick up the check. I'll pick up the check, he said without hesitating. I thought he was smart, a PhD in chemistry and a JD degree. He had been married and divorced twice. He was an editor of a poetry magazine. I was an editor of a poetry magazine, although mine was a fledgling one. He liked my poetry. We started to date. He took me to an Art Deco diner and to a charming neighborhood restaurant near his Chelsea apartment. He had a bed on a platform with a ladder I'd climb up. He told me he had been with a lot of women. He told me I was the 5th best in bed, which I took as a compliment. He gave me a great blurb from my first book, except for the sting of calling me middle-aged, something I wouldn't mind someone calling me now. He gave me a customized tape of his favorite rockabilly and country western songs, which I loved. He said he'd marry me if I lost 15 pounds. I thought he was dating me exclusively as I was dating him. He told me that he was dating another woman, a woman he shared his interest in bird watching with, and he told her he would marry her if she passed her bar exam this 3rd try. He told me he was moving to a cold city in the Midwest for a great opportunity in a prestigious law firm. The other woman passed the bar exam. I never even tried to lose 1 pound. They married and moved to the Midwest. Somehow, I didn't feel the least bit hurt and went on to the next poet who asked me out.
Thanks, Jean. Can't you hear Laura saying that? Jim Gwynn, my new wedding ring.
My new wedding ring. My husband gave it to me when we were married 4 years ago. It is actually 3 separate rings that fit tightly into each other, the way pieces of a jigsaw puzzle snap together. The ring in the middle is yellow gold. The 2 rings on either side, white gold, that have several really tiny diamonds. The ring says George Jensen under the band. The ring was made larger to fit over my arthritic knuckles. I remember in high school, I had the 2nd smallest size finger, measured for our senior ring, size 4.5. Now, I am a 9 with my swollen knuckles, though the bottom of my finger is a 7. But the ring is beautiful, even if my fingers aren't. And I haven't worn a wedding band for 20 years since my 20-year marriage was over. When I look at it, it reminds me that it's never too late to find love, whatever one's age. I give my single friends, male and female, hope, they tell me, though so many of them have told me they wouldn't be happy wearing my husband's dead 3rd wife's wedding ring. I tell them I am lucky I'm not superstitious.
Okay, thanks, Jim. James Haba, and poem written a year ago. James Haba.
Poem written a year ago for Gail, 1939 to 2016. My friend is going through chemo. She tells me she has lost her hair, and that is upsetting her more than the chemo. That her wonderful daughter bought her a wig. No one can tell, I say. That's true, but I'll know. A couple of weeks earlier, she had told me privately that the doctor said lymphoma, and she was completely freaked out. Who wouldn't be, I say. And then add the necessary, they cure a lot of that, I think. Though I have virtually no medical knowledge about it. Today, I'm having a violent reaction to the antibiotics I'm on for a minor problem. I find myself terribly nauseous, sitting on the bathroom tile and throwing up into the toilet, the way I did the first 3 months of the pregnancy, of my pregnancy so many years ago. I can't stand this, I think. Then think about my friend with a port now in her chest, getting another round of chemo and surgery scheduled for later this summer. My husband asks me how I feel. I think again of Gail and reply, I'm fine.
Thank you, Jim. Raymond Hammond, a police car across the street from the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. Raymond?
A police car across the street from the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. Years ago, as a teenager, I walked to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. I only worry that my new holiday dress would not make me look thinner. I only worry that the boy I liked would not smile at me, feeling as safe walking with my parents as I would ever feel. Today, decades later, with my new husband, though neither of us is statistically new, I'm startled to see a police car with officers directly across the street from the synagogue this high holiday, as well as another police officer guarding the entrance, his eyes scanning everyone on the street, his hand above his holster. And I think how the presence of police outside the synagogue today is as disturbing as a Rosh Hashanah dinner with a pitcher of milk and plate of brisket next to it on the holiday table.
Thanks, Raymond. Pat Hardigree, bridesmaid. Pat, are you there? I can't tell.
She was there, Maria.
Oh, here she is. Pat. Oh, unmute. No, unmute.
Right, I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Bridesmaid. I had only met her once at a family dinner. She was my fiance's first cousin, my own bridesmaid, a friend from first grade through our sophomore year at college, had written me a formal third-person note 2 weeks before my wedding and pulled out of it without any excuse. Earlier, she had forced my college roommate out by the price of the bridesmaid gown she was ordering, though I begged my college roommate to just ignore the whole price issue and wear any pink cocktail dress she liked. My roommate refused and said she didn't want to spoil the wedding. So Larry's cousin had her own bridesmaid's dress in pink tulle made in a week with so many crinolines under it, it looked as if an umbrella were open under her dress. But she did look gorgeous and very sexy with her square-cut, low-cut bodice as she walked down the aisle in front of me. Actually, I thought she looked more glamorous than I did in my demure white silk, understated, low-waisted Priscilla of Boston gown. I had loved so much when I tried it on that I didn't try on any others. But my bridegroom only saw me, I know, and anyway, incest was not his thing. The next year, my bridesmaid was getting married and had chosen the same Manhattan hotel my in-laws had chosen for me. After all, they wanted the lavish wedding for their son, and there was no way my widowed school teacher mother could afford the plaza that my in-laws wanted and insisted on paying for. I liked them a lot, but realized that big events were a necessary part of their lives. And I just wanted to get married. Their friends were still talking about my groom's bar mitzvah almost 10 years ago at the Waldorf Astoria. My bridesmaid asked if she could borrow my wedding gown. Of course, I said yes in gratitude for her being my bridesmaid at the last moment and to also try to weave my in-laws' family even closer. As she walked down the long aisle in the same room wearing my wedding gown from the year before, I was startled to see her mother had had a seamstress cover the entire gown in sequins, so it shimmered and flashed and had lost its elegance, but gained a Las Vegas showgirl look. I had to admit she looked beautiful, but she probably would have looked beautiful anyway in any gown. When she returned my bridal gown torn and stained, I gave it away to charity.
Good, Pat, thanks. Linda Hillinghouse, what I know about my father. No, Linda. Where'd she go? I think
Okay, am I here?
Yeah, you're there.
And you can hear me. Okay, sorry. What I didn't know about my father was my fault for not asking questions, for not knowing enough to ask questions. I knew his sunny disposition. I knew he could memorize the Odd Fellow inauguration book when he was Grand Master. I knew he could add 4 columns of figures in his head. I knew he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, and before that, the OPA and OPS, and before that, the Manhattan Project in Tennessee, and did something involving numbers, not science. I knew when he was often traveling home, he would bring me a box of marzipan fruit, strawberries, bananas, cherries, because he knew I loved that candy. I knew he insisted my mother sleep late on Sunday mornings when he was home, and made my younger brother and me his original chocolate French toast for breakfast. I knew he had been married when he was 18 because he got a nice Jewish girl pregnant, and later she miscarried. And this was years before he married my mother. I knew he had thought he would never have a child, and it would be the end of his family line, since his 2 older sisters had never married and were too old to have children. I knew he had never been bar mitzvahed because his father was an atheist. I knew his parents had been divorced and remarried and divorced again, and his father remarried someone else. I knew money was always a problem for my father growing up, and that he had delivered milk at 5 a.m. from his mother's grocery before he left for school. I knew he never had a mark lower than an A on his report cards, since my mother looked up his records when she was subbing in an old school in the city he'd attended. I knew he never made enough money to satisfy my mother, though he always worked and worked. I knew he didn't deserve the pain. Who does? From pancreatic cancer when I was 16 and my brother 13. I knew I was his favorite.
Charles Johnson, Obsession. Charles. Charles, sound. No, sound.
Obsession. My most recent obsession is continually washing my hands. I have a supply of tiny hand sanitizers in my bag. I have a large bottle I risked going into Walgreens to get when I kept calling early in the pandemic if they had gotten any in. And they replied, yes, and they had just put it at the front counter and it would be gone soon. And so they couldn't hold it for me, but I'd better come in now. And if I wanted it, and of course, only 1 bottle per customer, I finally got a bottle from Facebook. I think it came from China by slow boat from China. It took months to get to my doorstep, and I have a bottle in my car, in my kitchen, in my bathroom. But mostly, I am seriously obsessive when I visit my husband each day at the hospital, where they have foam disinfectant every few feet on the walls. I wash my hands when I hand him the New York Times and the Star Ledger from home. I wash my hands when I hand him his cell phone to call his daughter in California. I wash my hands after I touch my cell phone. I wash my hands after I pull up his thin blanket to keep him warm when I touch the bed rails, the tray, the box of tissues, and of course, the elevator buttons. And I try not to use the bathrooms, but sometimes if I've been visiting for 10 hours, I use the bathroom. Wash my hands after opening the door. And for every single step in the process of bathroom routine in that enclosed space, even tinier than the elevator that seems to be crowded with masked heavy breathers. I know my constant hand washing is obsessive, whether after bringing in a food package or the mail or delivered newspapers, or even taking the parking ticket at the hospital garage and later pushing all the buttons to pay with my credit cards. Still, the only time I don't wash my hands is when I lower my mask to kiss my husband, hello, or on my way out when I kiss him goodbye.
Very good. Thanks, Charles. Lainey Sutton Johnson, How Our Children Live.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. How Our Children Live, written the day after the terrorist attack near Stuyvesant High School, October 2017. Years ago, the week after 9/11, my 6-year-old granddaughter sits in her suburban first grade class as the principal phones her home to say Amanda's desk mate's father, a soccer coach for his son's team, is still missing. That father will never coach another soccer team again. And each year, my granddaughter and all of us listens for his name read on TV at the 9/11 memorial. After her parents split, my granddaughter at 8 moves with her mother and younger sister to live with her other grandmother, her abuela, in an immaculate apartment on a sometimes drive-by shooting street in Washington Heights. My granddaughter tells me not to point at anyone when I pick her up in my car for a rare jaunt to the Met. He could be a gang member and have a gun and think you're pointing at him. In 8th grade, my granddaughter was thrilled to be accepted at Stuyvesant High School, not only because it is such a top public high school, but also because it has a swimming pool. Though like many teenage girls, she eventually decides to forego swimming in favor of her hair not looking tangled and waterlogged each day, and instead becomes active in Aspira and involved with social justice in the Hispanic school community and beyond. At graduation, my granddaughter wins the poetry prize at Stuyvesant, but decides to be a computer science major at Harvard, where she has won a full scholarship. I see her trying to have a life without the struggles of a freelance poet like me, or her separated parents, who have each fallen into unexpected unemployment disasters as Amanda continues to tutor kids for free in the inner city. Last May, my granddaughter graduation from Harvard is a day that goes into our memory scrapbooks, hers, of course, her mother's, her abuela's, and mine. I wish her father, my son, could also be here, but I try not to focus on his absence. My granddaughter introduces us to her new and possibly first boyfriend. He brings her flowers and seems slightly nervous meeting her family for the first time. My granddaughter has warned me not to ask him any questions, and whether it is because he is Vietnamese and she's afraid I'll embarrass her by asking anything personal, or even worse, possibly politically incorrect. I think she has probably said this to all of her family here today, but I like him immediately because he arrives with a bouquet of tiger lilies for her, and he's summa cum laude from a nearby fine college. And though I don't know anything about him, summa cum laude, tells me he's not just bright, but also conscientious. When she started college, I told Amanda no one escapes without getting heartbroken. But I know, like so many other random things, love is one more thing I have no control over. Though I send a message to the gods of love to keep my granddaughter safe from the end of love with all its emotional hell. My granddaughter has signed a contract to work in the internet field. She will move to San Francisco, and though I will miss her future seems secure, unless some random plane crash, earthquake, flood, disease, accident finds her. And I know there is obviously no guaranteed safety in our world. Today, I read where the terrorist, a father of 3 children, rammed his rental Home Depot truck into a Stuyvesant school bus near the school and into the same running path my granddaughter once ran with her classmates, rammed his rental Home Depot truck into that school bus where 2 students were hurt, where 8 cyclists died, 15 wounded, chaos, where some students looked out upper floor windows and took photos with their cell phones, seeing kids running to safety, mothers and nannies running with strollers, seeing crushed bikes, spokes dented and bloody, the worst terror attack in the city since 9/11. And I think how random terrorism or just violence is something our children always live with, though try not to focus on. How by just minutes or even years, we are lucky or unlucky that it could have been us, our children, grandchildren on that bus or pathway at that moment as a truck hurtled towards us. Still, I think our children will continue to have the sweet toughness and resilience of one of the injured students on that Stuyvesant school bus yesterday, who, despite his wounds, returns to his class at Stuyvesant today, trying not to let the attack ruin his record, still trying for 100% attendance. Yes, this is how our children live. This is how we all live now.
Thank you, Elaine. Adele Kenny, Almost Addicted to Facebook is the title of the poem. Adele, I know I saw you a minute ago. Where is she?
Okay, almost addicted to Facebook. I have 3 close friends and I have 450 Facebook friends. I know about 30 of them, most through poetry readings. I have no idea who 300 of my Facebook friends are, but we seem to have some link through poetry. I use Facebook the way I used to use the post office years ago, sending out flyers and publicity on new books and readings. And I must admit, Facebook saves me lots of money on postage. Many of my Facebook friends also do this, and I appreciate the practicality of this. But many of my Facebook friends seem to use Facebook for social chatter and connection to hundreds that they really don't know, with announcements that they have a bad cold, they are going to the dentist, they are currently eating incredible rigatoni bolognese at a Manhattan restaurant. Or today would have been their parents' 70th wedding anniversary, and they post a vintage photo of their parents or a photo of their kids in their Easter outfits, or the birthday of Emily Dickinson, along with one of her legendary poems. And of course, every day Facebook notifies me it's at least one of my Facebook friends' birthday. And don't I want to wish this friend a happy birthday? My finger hurts from all the likes I press and too often write happy birthday as my Jewish guilt once again kicks in. Still, when I read someone lost someone close to them or is really sick, I stop to add a sad face and am sincere about it, often adding a brief comment, though I can't help wondering some if they're sure who I am. And for the 30 friends I actually know, I'm sincerely happy for them when they post a publication or major award. Sometimes I feel a tinge of envy for some of my 300 unknown Facebook friends if they post some prestigious award that I was hoping for, but mostly not. though I often soothe myself by falsely rationalizing and telling myself that maybe I was second in the contest or award I lost. Sometimes I stay away from Facebook for 2 days when I'm especially busy with deadlines or a family crisis. And those days when I don't have 2 hours to spend reading Facebook, I sometimes obsess about what I've missed.
Thanks, Adele. Michelle Lerner, Family Promises.
Family promises. When I was 16, my mother made me promise not to tell my father he was dying of pancreatic cancer. She made me promise not to tell my 13-year-old brother. She asked me to care for my father while she was teaching, since I was home by 12:30 from my double session high school, while she didn't get home from public school 11 until after 4. My father had a naturally sweet disposition, and I learned how pain could change even the sunniest of natures. I learned to lie that fall. I lied to my father, who wanted to believe he'd recover from painful pancreatitis. I lied to my brother. I learned to lie by omission. I smiled and lied to my best friends, my teachers, my friends on the school paper when they asked me if I were all right. I even lied to my mother and told her I was not depressed, as she managed to teach and do lesson plans and spend nights with my father as the tiny black and white TV droned on, mostly Yankee games that he couldn't focus on, as we all waited for the nurse who lived next door to arrive with the morphine shot prescribed by her husband, a resident at Memorial Hospital in Manhattan. After my father died, my mother spiraled into depression, though she continued to teach. My brother turned atheist. I learned to keep smiling and lying, and for years saying I was fine no matter what random disaster plummeted toward me and those I loved.
Thanks, Michelle. Beautiful reading. Lisa called Nicolau at her other grandmother's funeral.
At her other grandmother's funeral for Bianca. When I see my granddaughter with her, hands covering her eyes and face, I realize she is quietly crying, so no one will notice her tears. So no one will notice her soft sobs her hands try to muffle. Earlier, she sat next to me so I wouldn't be completely alone during the wake. For her other grandmother, her abuela Judith. She had lived with since kindergarten, when her mother and my son had split. In all the years and all the time we have spent together, though never as many as I would have liked, I have never seen her cry, at least since she was a toddler. I instinctively put my arm around her shoulder, knowing it won't really take away grief, just perhaps give a bit of comfort, maybe not, maybe yes. She doesn't pull away. Still, after a while, my college granddaughter excuses herself to greet one of her former teachers from public school who has worked with her other grandmother. She excuses herself again once she is back to say, I need to check on my mom, who is sitting in the front row. I watch as Bianca wobbles slightly on her new black heels, new black morning dress, so different from her usual uniform of sneakers, jeans, and hoodies. There are about 300 people in this chapel, some drifting in and out, some leaving, new ones appearing during the 6-hour wait that apparently is the actual funeral. Eulogies by my granddaughter's mother in Spanish, out of respect for her mother's friends and family, though she herself speaks elegant English normally. A eulogy by the sister of Abuela who has flown in from Puerto Rico, a choir from Abuela's church, another eulogy in Spanish from the pastor of her Baptist church. I'm surprised by the crowd, though Judith has lived in her Washington Heights apartment for 50 years when she and her husband settled there. And maybe there are this many people at her wake, maybe because she has been so active, working at the voting booths in the basement, Maybe because she greeted new arrivals in her high rise. Maybe because she was active in local politics. Maybe because she has worked at a neighborhood school as a teaching assistant for so many years, though once, when young, she had been a teacher in Puerto Rico. Maybe because she has been active in her church. Her potato salad is legendary in her family, as are her empanadas. She seems to have liked everyone, except my son, whom she hated. I don't think she really liked me because I was his mother, but she was smart enough not to say anything to my face about me. Just my son on the rare occasions we saw each other. My older granddaughter's graduation from Harvard, this younger granddaughter's high school graduation from Brooklyn Tech. And I wonder, am I any different from any other parent or grandparent I know? When our children or grandchildren hurt, we would do anything to eliminate their sadness, would take it on ourselves if we could, wrap their sorrows around us like lycra if it were only possible, even though we realize we have no way to make their heartbreak disappear. And I think what a good grandmother my granddaughter's other grandmother must have been to drown Bianca in such sorrow.
Wonderful. Lisa, Marion Paganello, How My Parents Met. Marion?
Hi, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. How my parents met. My parents met in a Chinese nightclub, Chin Lee's, close to Radio City, where my mother worked as a bookkeeper, and my father was their part-time accountant, though not a CPA. My mother had a steady boyfriend, Max, who was a doctor, and someone my grandmother approved of in those Depression years when money was more than tight and security was spelled with a capital S. My mother had graduated from normal school, the first of her family to go to college, but hadn't been able to secure a job as a teacher yet. She said my father was fresh, that he had put his hand on her knee under the table where they were working. But I think she must have liked it, because that doctor was out of her life soon after, though my grandmother had told my father when he appeared at my grandparents' railroad apartment over their 5 small stores near Sheepshead Bay on a night the doctor was visiting my mother, to tell that doctor you're her cousin. But my father didn't. The men played gin rummy. My father, with his photographic memory, won the game, won my mother. And sometimes I wonder if something runs in my DNA on the maternal side when we women don't listen to our mothers, but make the choice of a man based on how we feel when his hand touches our knee under the table.
Thank you, Marion. Penny Perry, Overnight Hike. Penny.
Overnight hike. When I think of hiking, I remember Camp Madeline Mulford, Girl Scout camp when I was 11. It was a big deal, our overnight hike, something different from our open canvas tents where we slept with mesquite netting covering our faces, the scent of citronella, the scary night walks up to the outhouses on a nearby hill. The major event of our summer was this hike to a grassy area, although it all looked the same to me, used to tiny houses with alleys between them and a patch of backyard. We placed our coarse blankets on the grass before twilight, and I noticed cows munching grass nearby. I couldn't sleep and spent the night holding my flashlight and writing a long poem in my notebook, originally given to me with instructions to write a letter home each day, which I didn't, and where my dislike of writing letters probably started. And somehow I remember sleeping under the stars for the first time, the cows in the nearby meadow, the vastness of our universe, the insignificance of myself in it, recognizing the infinite wonder and beauty of our world for the first time. In the morning, we began to hike up some mountain with a Native American name, although we called it Indian in politically incorrect and unaware 1949, but a name that today eludes me. I was not even halfway up the mountain when I realized I didn't have the energy to go even one more step. My counselors, who seemed much older to me, but were probably 19 and 20, ordered 2 other girls to grab my feet and shoulders and carry me up this Girl Scout Mount Everest. My tent mates were not happy, but like good Girl Scouts, they followed orders. Our visiting day, 2 weeks later, the entire camp put on a show. My prose poem, produced like an amateur skit that involved the boring cows I had written about, but left out the wonder of our place in our vast planet under the distant stars. The poem play was well received, as anything produced by kids is received by their parents. Those campers playing cows got the most applause. That summer was the last hike I ever took, but it was not the last poem I would ever write.
Wonderful. Jason Poole, My Neighbor's Garden.
My Neighbor's Garden, for Susie Choi. My neighbor, who loves to garden so much, she even pulls the weeds from my tiny adjoining backyard. She tells me she worries about her plants and loses sleep at night, thinking about the deer eating the leaves and flowers she's planted. Blue hyacinths, pale pink roses, peach trees, pear trees, and more whose Latin names I don't remember. She's cleared the small wilderness that first greeted her, just as she cleared space for herself when she arrived from Korea decades ago and raised 3 daughters virtually on her own, working so hard to give them the promised American dream. I remember the words she told me she told them. I'll do my share and you do yours. And they did. 2 daughters, valedictorians of a fine public school. One, now a lawyer and a councilwoman, often visiting their mother with their children. Not so different from my neighbor, who diligently gardens when she is not working and worries about her plants at night.
Next is Maud Carolyn Pick and My 2 Lives. Maud?
Yes.
You there?
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
My 2 lives. This week, I am definitely living 2 lives. At this moment, I am leading a poetry workshop for mature adults by Zoom. It is a joyful time because the poets who join today are as professional as many I've heard at Dodge festivals. It makes me wonder how important it is to start early, or at least started an MFA years ago with colleagues, friends, and classmates who will be future networking editors of journals or even publishers, to form the old boys or even old girls club where they reach out to help each other. Still, I tell myself that today it is often like a lottery. Someone has to win one of those prestigious contests and get a book published through it, and maybe win a sizable chunk of money. But though the reality of it is hard, it is not impossible. And even if it doesn't work out with so many MFA students, some on a goal of 100 submissions and possibly 100 rejections. Sending out poems is more like a factory making thousands of masks on a deadline for this pandemic. Still, for a really true poet, whatever that means, the jubilation from writing a poem he or she, or more politically correct today, they feel is the ultimate poetry happiness, greater than any contest or publication can ever bring. My second life can be categorized by my day to day. By 10 o'clock, with our rescue dog Toffee, fed, walked, and played with, I am waiting in line at Morristown Hospital to be allowed to go upstairs after being checked that I don't have a fever or cough or haven't been to a list of states other than New Jersey lately. I am tagged, and despite social distancing, am on a packed elevator going up to the 5th floor. I am definitely concerned about getting COVID-19. I get my nerve up and politely ask another visitor if she can pull her mask over her nose. She says her asthma makes it difficult for her to breathe, but pulls it up anyway. I say I understand, and it's all so hard, and thank her. I can't help but think how her saying, "I can't breathe," has no political implications, but how in this current time, it's almost impossible not to think of George Floyd. I wash my hands with the disinfectant foam on the wall, and then again next to the entrance of my husband's room. He had a procedure, we used to call it an operation, yesterday, and has not had regular food for a week. I pull down my mask, kiss him hello. He smiles. I give him the New York Times. I tell him I have to leave in 45 minutes to lead my Zoom workshop at home, but we'll come back to the hospital when it's over and stay with him until visitors have to leave at 8 p.m. I tell him he's looking better, and I'm not certain that's true or just something I want to believe. Actually, I have a third life I'm leading, that never seems to leave me, that constantly haunts me. My son is still missing, and it's now more than 4 months.
Thanks so much, Maud. Ken Ronkowitz, Ideal Day. Ken?
Ideal day. My ideal day would be sitting at home with a new Philip Roth novel. Probably impossible since he died last year and gave up writing novels several years before that. My ideal day would be the phone ringing and my younger son saying he had finally gotten a job in his field, the travel industry. Though, like typewriter repair business, the travel agent is on the job endangered list. My ideal day would be the mail arriving with a letter from my doctor saying all my lab work was now normal. My ideal day would be having a number of Kit Kat bars next to me as I read. My ideal day would be my grandchildren's mother saying that since my son has a good job, she is thinking of going back to him. Maybe the most impossible thing on my list. My ideal day would be complete silence from our president. No tweets or Instagrams, no press releases as he sits in the Oval Office watching game shows. My ideal day would be news reports without one incident of racial violence, prejudice against immigrants, gun violence, bombings, or children starving in Yemen, Syria, or our own country. But my ideal day is as impossible and elusive for me as Philip Roth coming back from the dead and sitting down at his computer and typing out a new novel.
Thanks, Ken. Seema Tepper, At My Age. Seema?
Yes. At my age, I can only compare myself in looks to women around my age. I've found it's the only way to stay sane. Most of the women of my generation in their late 60s or 70s are grateful not to be struggling with arthritic knees, bad backs, maybe even chemo. But still, I admit at times to fleetingly think about how I look, though I wish this were not true. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one. I finally know to never compare myself to a 20-year-old student in my creative writing class. Even the plain ones with their thick, dewy skin are beautiful. And I never, ever compare myself to 40-year-olds like Angelina Jolie, Halle Berry, or Jennifer Aniston. But still, I do measure myself against the glamorous icons, and so happy they exist, of my age group. Jane Fonda, Diana Ross, Blondie, Raquel Welch, though knowing even these goddesses could, at their age, break a hip, have a stroke, have a bad mammogram. But suddenly, I remind myself of one beautiful woman who just turned 75 and will not lose her physical strength or looks to age. A woman you will never see with a cane or jowls. Of course, it's Wonder Woman, eternally beautiful, unless her male creator suddenly decides to cause her demise by just putting down his pen forever.
Thanks, Seema. Zan Wintries, I've always worried. Zan, I know you were there a minute ago.
You can hear me?
Yeah, but I can't see you.
Really?
It's okay, it's okay.
Can you see me now?
I see Sheldrake, but I don't see you. But that's okay, just read.
Okay. I've always worried. I've always worried. I think it's in my DNA. At 7, I worried I'd die when the ether rubber mask was put over my face. At 12, I worried for a year that my mother, whom everyone said I didn't look at all like, wasn't my real mother, when her sister told me my mother was my father's second wife and swore me to secrecy, or my mother would never forgive her for telling me. At 16, I worried my father would die of pancreatic cancer. He did. At 20, I worried my fiance would die in a car crash before our wedding. At 21, I worried I'd die in childbirth. It was close, but I didn't. At 30, I worried my son would drown at overnight camp, even though I'd asked the camp owner if any child had ever died at his camp before my son was signed up. And the owner answered, no. But I never worried a tree would fall on my neighbor and kill her, though she managed to push her son out of its path. And I never worried that there would be a terrorist attack that would bring down the World Trade Towers with so many killed, including my friend's son and my first grade granddaughter's seatmate's father. And I never worried that you wouldn't love me. And so far, I still don't worry about that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ann. Fred Ayuchi. I don't have the whole name of the poem, but Martha Stewart. Go with Martha Stewart in the title.
Martha Stewart visits my apartment.
Okay, good.
In my dream, Martha Stewart arrives at my apartment. Your place one for an extreme intervention, she announces, rushing in with TV cameras and 4 of my closest friends who are looking nervous. Your friends wrote to me, Martha continues, and said how none of them has visited you for 5 years because you say that your 2-room apartment is too littered with books and poems in messy piles to allow them in. The only place that is not covered in books is your view through your unwashed windows, 26 floors above the Hudson River, shimmering below, and the Empire State Building lit up for another holiday, and the skyline still beautiful through your windows that need Windex desperately. We love you and don't want you to trip over those books and break a hip or worse. There's nothing wrong with my place that I can't clean up myself, I say, recognizing an intervention when I see one. You need help, they say. You can't do it alone. How many times have you said you're going to clean up your apartment and haven't been able to? Martha puts her hands up to stop them from talking. I'm here, she says. Things will be okay. You need to admit you're addicted to books, she says as she picks up Fear of Flying from the floor and tosses it into a giant trash bag.
Wonderful. And I'm going to read As Winter Sets In. As winter sets in, I wonder if I'll survive it. My husband died 2 weeks ago. Of course, I miss him, and it's odd to be in this house without his strong presence. But the dog is here and misses him too, as Chaffee sleeps where my husband slept, in the bottom of the bed where Jim's feet would have been. My younger son is also dead after being missing for 4.5 months, with the anxiety of wondering if he'd been tortured or murdered or locked in the trunk of the rental car that had been there, thrown in the river. No matter how much I continue my work commitments during the day, that sad ache returns like panic intermittently throughout the day. I don't think I'll ever get over the sadness of my younger son's death. And several of my poet friends who have also lost a child tell me I won't get over it, but I'll get through it. I know there's nothing I can change, so I go on, not one day at a time, but 1 hour at a time. And yes, the writing helps, maybe the only thing that helps, except for my older son's caring phone calls each day. But now with Jim gone, I wonder if I'll survive this winter, since I naturally focused on his illness and because of COVID, skipped my own medical appointments. And now I am faced with the bleak news from my own doctors after finally going in for tests. And I can't help wonder, as winter sets in, if I'll ever survive it. To be honest, I didn't know if I could get through that poem without crying. Anyway, I thank you all for being here. And I hope that Laura knows that you're here celebrating her work, celebrating her new book, and that you'll tell other people about the book and how clearly her voice comes through in these poems, and that sardonic humor she always has, mixed in with very sad poems part. There'll always be this little bit of irony or this little dig at herself or at one of her lovers or husband, whatever. And she manages to get away with it. She had such a strong voice that I was afraid we wouldn't be able to do this because her voice is so strong in these poems. But it was strong enough to carry through all your different voices. And I thank you for being here tonight to celebrate Laura Boss and her poetry and her life as a woman and her life as a good friend. Let's all give each other a round of applause. Okay. Did somebody want to make an ending? Who clapped?
I did. I did.
Good, thank you. All right, but I think you did a wonderful job, and it's a hard thing to do because I think we've all heard Laura read, and it's hard to imitate the way she read, the way she was able to make you both laugh and cry at the same time. But the one thing we know is that her poetry will live on after her. There will people who will still be crying and laughing at her poems a long time from now, I hope. And we're all going to help push her poems and push her life as a poet if we can. Thanks for being here, all of you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Maria.
Thank you, everybody.
Bravo, everyone. Bravo.
Thanks, Maria.
Bravo.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you,
Honey.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Bye, good night all.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
So good to see you all.
There's
Everybody
Zan.
wants-
There's Sheldrake.
Good night, Maria.
Good night, honey.
Good night, Maria.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Night, Maria.
Good night, all.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Be well,
Now,
Maria.
Waltons. Good night. Whatever their names were. I don't remember. Remember the Waltons? They
Good
would all
night,
say good night.
Smita and
Good night.
Sue and Maria.
Good night, Annie.
Thank you,
Oh,
Maria.
thank you to Sue and Smita for taking care of all the technical parts of this. And it's so wonderful to have two people who are so great in taking care of the technical things that I can't take care of. So I'm grateful to them both for their help always and their continued support of everything we're doing in the Poetry Center and in the Cultural Affairs Department. Anyway, see you soon, I hope.
Good night, Maria.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Susan. Thank you, Susan. Thank you,
Thank you,
Smita.
Maria.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Sally. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It was a beautiful, beautiful reading.
It was, wasn't it? It really, was making me cry, but nobody. I was afraid I would be the only one who burst into tears. So at least I didn't do that. Well, I cried a couple of times when you guys were reading.
It was nice. It was really nice.
It's hard to believe that Laura's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.